Days turned into weeks and life settled into a steady rhythm for Amir and his mother. The morning sun woke them both and the streets outside came alive with children playing and merchants preparing their stalls. Amir's work at the construction site had grown easier with practice, and he had become known among the workers as a reliable and honest man. Each evening he returned home with both wages and a sense of accomplishment that gave him peace of mind. One afternoon, while taking a short break from work, Amir noticed a group of elderly men sitting under a tree near the market. They were speaking quietly among themselves, sharing stories from long ago. Amir paused for a moment and listened. Their stories spoke of courage, sacrifice, and struggles that had shaped the town over the years. He realized that his own story, the story of his service and the medal he had earned, was connected to these stories. Every life had its battles, and every person carried a history that deserved respect. As he walked back to the construction site, Amir thought of Raza. The kindness shown by the shop owner had been a turning point for him. If Raza had only seen the medal as an object, Amir would have left the shop with nothing. Instead, Raza had seen the man behind the medal, the sacrifices he had made, and had given him both respect and help. Amir felt a desire growing inside him to share the same kind of support with others in need. At the site, Amir noticed the young boy he had helped some weeks ago struggling to lift a heavy plank. He rushed over to guide him, showing how to hold it properly and balance the weight. The boy looked at Amir with admiration, his face shining with determination. "I will be strong like you one day," he said proudly. Amir smiled and encouraged him. "Strength is not only in your arms. It is in your heart and your will. Keep learning, keep helping, and you will become stronger every day." Later that evening, Amir returned home to find his mother sitting by the window, knitting a small blanket. She looked up at him with warmth in her eyes. "How was your day, my son?" she asked. Amir placed the wooden box with the medal carefully on the table and sat beside her. "Good," he replied. "I helped the boy at the site. He is learning to carry his own burden. I hope he will grow to be a good man." Miriam smiled and laid a gentle hand on his arm. "You are teaching him more than strength, Amir. You are teaching him respect, courage, and kindness. These are the greatest lessons of all." Amir's eyes softened as he looked at the medal in the box. Its shine seemed to remind him not only of his past but also of the promise he had made to himself, to live with honor, to respect life, and to carry kindness wherever he went. The medal was no longer just a memory of his bravery in the army. It had become a symbol of the new life he was building, a life filled with hope and care for others. That night, after Miriam had gone to sleep, Amir sat alone by the window. The moonlight fell gently on the medal, making it glimmer softly. He reflected on all that had happened since he had walked into Raza's shop. The help he had received had not only given his mother medicine, but had also reminded him that respect and kindness were powerful forces. He understood that life would still have hardships, but now he had faith that he could face them. Amir made a quiet promise to himself that he would always honor the kindness he had been shown. He would help those in need, guide the weak, and support anyone who carried a burden heavier than their strength. The lessons of Raza's generosity were etched into his heart, and he knew that they would guide him for the rest of his life. As the night deepened and the stars shone brightly, Amir placed the medal back in its wooden box and held it close. He felt a calm confidence within him. Life had given him another chance, and he would not waste it. With hope in his heart and a renewed sense of purpose, Amir closed his eyes, ready to face the days ahead with courage and care. The morning air was fresh and quiet as Amir stepped outside his home. The streets were alive with the usual sounds of the town: children laughing, merchants calling out prices, and the faint hum of carts moving along the dusty road. Amir carried the wooden box with the medal carefully, feeling its weight both in his hands and in his heart. It had become more than just a piece of metal. It was a reminder of courage, honor, and the kindness that had changed his life. As he walked toward the market, he thought about how far he had come. Months ago, he had been tired, worried, and unsure of how to care for his sick mother. The thought of selling the medal had felt like the only option. Now, with Raza's help, he had found a new path. His mother's health had improved. His life had gained stability, and he had discovered a new purpose: to help others and live with honor every day. At the construction site, Amir worked diligently. He guided the young boy he had been mentoring, showing him how to carry tools and organize materials. The boy's confidence grew with each passing day, and Amir felt pride in seeing him learn and grow. He realized that teaching and supporting someone else was as rewarding as earning a wage. Every act of guidance, every small help given, built a stronger bond between them. After the day's work, Amir returned home with the wages he had earned. Mariam was waiting, sitting near the window and knitting a small cloth. Her health had improved considerably, and her smile now brightened their modest home. Amir carefully placed the wooden box with the metal on the table. Mariam's eyes softened as she looked at it. "You have worked hard, my son," she said gently. "You have built hope where there was despair." Amir nodded. "It is because someone believed in me when I had lost faith. Raza's kindness gave us a chance to start again. Now it is our turn to carry that kindness forward." Mariam reached out and touched the metal lightly. "This metal is a symbol of your past, Amir, but it is also a symbol of your present and your future. You are showing courage not on a battlefield, but in life itself. That is the greatest honor a person can have." Amir smiled softly and placed the metal back in its box. He thought about all the people he had met, the lessons he had learned, and the lives he had touched. He knew that life would continue to have challenges, but now he had the strength and courage to face them. He understood that honor was not just about recognition or awards. It was about kindness, perseverance, and caring for those who depend on you. That night, after Mariam had gone to sleep, Amir sat quietly by the window. The moonlight fell gently across the room, illuminating the metal in its wooden box. He held it close and reflected on everything that had happened since he had walked into the pawn shop. The memory of Raza's words and actions filled him with gratitude. "Some things cannot be sold," Raza had said. Amir now understood the depth of that statement. The metal could not be sold because it represented more than bravery. It represented life, hope, and the enduring power of respect. Amir made a silent promise to himself. He would live each day with the same honor and care that had been shown to him. He would help those in need, teach those who had lost direction, and support anyone who carried burdens heavier than they could bear. In his heart, he knew that by doing this he would honor not only the metal but also the people who had helped him when he needed it most. The next morning, Amir woke with renewed energy. He looked at the streets of the town, the children playing and the merchants preparing for the day. With the metal safe in its box and hope in his heart, he stepped forward into the world with confidence. He was no longer a man weighed down by worry. He was a man guided by courage, respect, and the promise of kindness. Life had given him a second chance, and Amir was determined to live it fully, honorably, and with a heart ready to help others. The metal remained a quiet witness to his journey, a reminder of the past and a guide for the future. Amir knew that no matter what challenges came, he would face them with courage, care, and honor. And in that moment, the soldier, the son, and the man had found peace, purpose, and hope that would last a lifetime. Mira lived in a quiet town where most people knew each other by name. The streets were lined with small shops, a park where children played, and a bakery that smelled of fresh bread every morning. That bakery belonged to Mira. She had run it for years, and it was her way of staying close to people while keeping her own life private. Every day she woke up before sunrise, tied her hair back neatly, and prepared trays of bread, buns, and cakes for the morning rush. To many she looked like a simple woman, someone ordinary and unremarkable. But there was one thing about her that no one could ignore. Mira had scars. They ran along her arms, across her shoulder, and faintly on her neck. She usually wore long sleeves to cover them, but when summer heat arrived, it became impossible to hide them completely. When her sleeves slipped or her collar shifted, the scars were visible. They were not light scratches, but marks that told of pain, of survival, and of something most people in her town could not imagine. Some people whispered about them. At the counter of her bakery, when Mira leaned forward to hand a customer a loaf of bread, eyes sometimes lingered longer than they should. A few customers avoided looking at her directly, unsure if asking would seem rude. Others gave their own explanations. Some said she must have been in a terrible accident. Others thought she had survived a fire. And there were always a few who were unkind, who laughed quietly among themselves, making cruel jokes that Mira pretended not to hear. Mira never explained. She had learned long ago that silence was safer than giving pieces of her story to people who would not understand. When she worked, she focused on the dough in her hands, the ovens warming the bakery and the smell of butter and sugar filling the air. She kept her smile small but polite, serving everyone who entered, whether they respected her or not. One warm afternoon, a group of college students came into the bakery. They were lively, loud, and playful, their voices echoing off the small walls. Mira served them with patience even when they spoke over one another. As she placed their order on the counter, her sleeve slipped slightly, revealing a section of her scarred arm. One of the students gasped and nudged his friend. Another leaned in to look more closely, and then laughter followed. "Did you see that?" One whispered loudly enough for her to hear. "Looks like she fought with a wild animal," another replied, trying not to laugh but failing. Mira's hands trembled slightly as she folded their change into their palms. She kept her head down, her voice steady, and simply said, "Have a good day." The students left, still chuckling, and as the door closed behind them, the bakery grew quiet again. Mira stood still for a moment, taking a slow breath before returning to her work. She had faced this kind of moment many times before, and though it hurt, she knew how to carry it quietly. But behind her calm face and quiet life, Mira carried memories that were far from ordinary. Her scars were not born from clumsiness or bad luck. They were proof of years spent in places no one in this town had ever been. And hidden under her sleeve was something even more unusual. Inked into her skin, faded with time but still sharp in meaning, was a tattoo. It was not like the simple designs teenagers got on a whim. It was a unit tattoo, a mark that spoke of brotherhood, loyalty, and battles fought side by side. Only a certain kind of person would ever understand its meaning. That evening, after the rush of customers had passed, Mira wiped down the counters and closed the bakery. She stepped outside to lock the door, and as she turned, she noticed a stranger walking slowly down the street. He was tall, with gray hair cut short, his shoulders broad even though his posture showed weariness. His steps were steady but heavy, like a man carrying years of memories. Mira thought little of it, assuming he was just passing through town, and went on her way home. The next morning, when the bakery bell rang again, the same man entered. He stood quietly at the counter, his eyes scanning the loaves behind her. Mira served him as she did with everyone, placing fresh bread in a paper bag. But when her sleeve shifted slightly as she handed it to him, the man's eyes widened. He froze, his gaze fixed not on the scars but on the faint lines of the tattoo just above her wrist. For the first time in years, Mira saw recognition in someone's face. The stranger did not laugh. He did not whisper. Instead, he stared with silent respect, as if he had just uncovered a truth that no one else in this town could ever guess. The man stood frozen, holding the bag of bread but forgetting to move. His eyes stayed on Mira's arm as if he had seen something that pulled him back many years. Mira noticed his stillness and shifted her sleeve quickly, hiding the tattoo again. She gave a polite smile and said, "Is there anything else you need?" The man cleared his throat, his voice heavy. "No, thank you." He paid and left, but his steps outside slowed and his head turned once more toward the bakery window. For Mira, it was just another moment of someone staring too long, and she thought little more of it. She continued her work as customers came and went. But for the man, the sight of that tattoo was not something he could forget. His name was Arun. He had once been a soldier, serving for many years in places far from peace. The tattoo he had glimpsed was not just a mark. It was a unit symbol that belonged to a special group. He had served with men who carried that mark, and he knew it was not common. Seeing it on a quiet woman in a small bakery shook him deeply. Later that day, Arun returned to the bakery. Mira looked up in surprise when she saw him again. Few customers came twice in one day. He stepped forward, placed his bag on the counter, and said softly, "I know that tattoo." Mira froze. Her hands, which had been busy wiping the counter, stilled completely. She looked at him with guarded eyes, not hostile but wary. "I don't know what you mean," she replied. Arun did not argue. Instead, he nodded slowly and said, "I served. A long time ago. I was with the group near the northern border. That mark was theirs." For the first time in years, Mira's face showed something more than calm politeness. Her eyes flickered with recognition. She studied his face carefully, as though trying to read if he truly understood. Finally, she said quietly, "You served too." Arun nodded. "Yes, many years. I left it behind, but some things never leave us." Mira's lips pressed together. She hesitated, then tugged her sleeve up just enough for the faded tattoo to show. Arun's breath caught. He whispered the name of the unit under his breath. It was the same unit he had once worked alongside. How? Arun asked softly, still in disbelief. How is it that you were part of them? Mira stepped back slightly, unsure if she wanted to open that part of her life again. For so long she had been just the baker, the simple woman with scars. People looked at her but never knew her truth. Now here was a stranger who recognized her mark within seconds. It was a long time ago, Mira said quietly. And it is not something I share here. This town does not understand. They only see what is on the outside. She glanced down at her scars, then pulled her sleeve back over her arm. Aaron's eyes softened. I understand more than you think. I know what those scars mean. I know what it costs to carry them. Mira gave a small, tired smile. Most people here laugh. They whisper, they guess, but they never think it could be more than an accident. They don't need to know, Aaron said. But I know, and that is enough. There was a silence between them, not heavy but filled with respect. For Mira, it was strange to feel understood after so many years of being judged. For Arun, it was a shock to find a fellow soldier hidden in such an ordinary place. Over the next few days, Arun returned to the bakery often. At first, Mira thought it was just coincidence, but soon she realized he came not only for bread. Sometimes they spoke only briefly, but each time the wall of silence around Mira began to crack. Arun never pushed for details, but his presence made it easier for her to breathe. One evening, as the bakery was closing, Arun stayed behind to help her carry flour sacks inside. As they set them down, he said softly, "You don't have to tell me everything. But if you ever want to share, I will listen." Mira looked at him for a long time. Her heart carried memories too heavy to share with anyone in town. But now there was someone who might understand. She nodded slightly, her voice almost a whisper. Maybe one day. As Arun left that evening, Mira stood by the bakery door and watched him go. For the first time in years, she did not feel completely alone with her scars. She knew he carried his own, even if they were not visible. That night, when Mira lay in bed, she thought of the laughter of the students, the whispers of the town, and then the look in Aaron's eyes when he saw her tattoo. She realized there was power in being seen by the right person, even if the rest of the world never understood. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning of a connection that might change both of their lives. The next morning began as usual for Mira. She unlocked the bakery before the sun rose and started kneading the dough. The smell of yeast and butter soon filled the small shop, wrapping her in the comfort of routine. Yet her mind was not fully on her work. She kept thinking about the stranger, Arun, and the way he had recognized her tattoo instantly. For years she had buried that part of her life, hiding it beneath long sleeves and quiet smiles. Now, with one glance, someone had seen through her silence. When the bell above the door rang, Mira looked up and saw Arun again. He stepped inside with the same calm, steady walk as before. She felt her heart quicken, though her face remained composed. "Good morning," she greeted politely. "Morning," Arun replied, placing a small basket on the counter. "I thought I'd bring something for you today. Fresh vegetables from the market." Mira blinked in surprise. Few people ever brought her gifts. Most only took bread and left without another word. She accepted the basket with a quiet thank you and set it aside. Arun simply nodded as if it were nothing at all and ordered his bread. After the other customers left, the bakery grew quiet again. Arun stayed by the counter, his eyes gentle. "Do you ever miss it?" he asked softly. Mira paused. She did not need to ask what he meant. She wiped her hands on her apron and thought carefully before answering. "Some parts," she admitted. "The people, the bond, the way we trusted each other without question. That is hard to find anywhere else." Arun nodded in agreement. "I feel the same." The silence after leaving is louder than the battles themselves. Her eyes lifted at his words. It was rare to hear someone describe what she had felt for so long. In this small town, people thought her scars were strange marks. They did not know about the silence that followed, when one left a world built on trust, danger, and sacrifice. Aaron leaned against the counter. "I was young when I joined. I thought I knew what strength was. But it was not strength of the body that mattered most. It was the strength to keep going, to protect the person next to you." Mira nodded slowly. "Yes, that is what the tattoo means. It is not about glory. It is about remembering the ones who stood beside us." For a moment, the bakery felt less like a small town shop and more like a meeting place of old soldiers who carried the same weight. That evening, when Mira closed the bakery, she saw Aaron waiting outside. She hesitated but then walked with him as he fell into step beside her. The streets were quiet, the lamps just beginning to glow as the sky darkened. "People in this town do not know your story," Aaron said gently, "but I hope one day they see beyond what they laugh at." "They never will," Mira replied softly, "and I don't expect them to. They only know the life they see here. To them, I am just a woman who makes bread." "Maybe that is enough," Aaron said, glancing at her. "But you are more than that, even if they never know it." They walked in silence for a while until they reached her home. Mira unlocked the door and turned to him. "Why do you come back every day?" she asked. Aaron looked at her honestly. "Because it feels like I found a part of my past that I thought was gone. You remind me that I was not alone in what I went through, and maybe you need that reminder too." Mira did not reply at once. She studied his face, marked with lines of age but also with the weight of someone who had endured. Finally, she gave a small nod. "Maybe you're right." That night, Mira sat by her window, the basket of vegetables he had given her resting on the table. She touched the edge of her sleeve where the tattoo lay hidden. For the first time in years, she did not feel ashamed of it. Instead, she felt a quiet pride, the kind she once carried with her unit. She realized that Aaron's presence was stirring something she thought she had lost, the courage to remember openly, even if only with one person. And deep inside, she knew that the scars people mocked were not a sign of weakness but proof of survival. Proof that she had lived through storms many could never imagine. For the first time in a long while, Mira went to bed with a lighter heart, wondering what tomorrow would bring with this unexpected bond. Days passed, and the rhythm of Mira's life began to change slowly. The bakery still opened each morning. The smell of fresh bread still floated through the street, and customers still came with their small smiles and coins in hand. But now there was something different. Aaron had become part of the routine. Sometimes he came in the morning, sometimes in the evening, and sometimes he stayed longer than he needed. The townspeople noticed. Some whispered when they saw the gray-haired man sitting at a corner table, drinking tea that Mira quietly placed in front of him. Others raised their brows when they noticed the way Mira, usually so quiet and distant, allowed herself to speak a little more when he was around. One afternoon, a woman from the town leaned across the counter and asked Mira, "Who is that man who keeps visiting? A friend of yours?" Mira only gave a small smile and said, "Just a customer who likes bread." She did not explain more, and the woman left with her curiosity unsatisfied. But inside, Mira knew Arun was not just a customer. He was someone who had seen the part of her life she had worked so hard to bury, and though it scared her to open that door again, she felt a quiet comfort knowing someone else carried the same kind of memories. One evening, after closing the bakery, Mira found Arun waiting outside as usual. They walked together down the narrow streets, their steps falling in easy rhythm. For the first time, Mira decided to share a piece of her past. "I joined when I was young," she began softly. "Not because I wanted glory, but because I had no choice. Life gave me few paths, and that was the one I took. The training was hard, the battles harder, but the hardest part was not the pain. It was losing people I cared for." Arun listened silently, his face serious, his eyes steady on the path ahead. He did not interrupt. He knew the weight of such words and the effort it took for her to speak them. Mira continued, "The scars you saw, they are not just marks on the skin. They are stories, reminders of places and moments I can never forget. Sometimes I feel them burning, not from pain but from memory." Aaron finally spoke. "I know that feeling. Mine are not on the outside, but they stay with me all the same. People do not see them, but they live in my mind and my dreams." For a while, neither of them spoke again. They reached the park where children's laughter still echoed, though the day was fading. Mira sat on a bench and Aaron sat beside her. The quiet of the evening wrapped around them, and for once Mira felt she was not carrying her silence alone. Later that week, Mira faced another moment of unkindness in the bakery. A group of young men entered, loud and careless. When Mira handed them their bread, one noticed the edge of her scar and whispered something to his friend. Laughter followed, sharp and cruel. Mira's face stayed calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she counted the change. Before she could react, Aaron, who was seated at the corner table, rose and stepped forward. His presence was firm but not angry. He looked directly at the young men and said, "Show respect. You do not know the story behind what you laugh at." The laughter died instantly. The young men shifted uncomfortably under his steady gaze. Without another word, they took their bread and left. Mira stood still, her heart pounding. She had endured mockery many times, but never had someone spoken for her. When the door closed, she turned to Aaron. "You did not have to do that," she said quietly. Aaron shook his head. "No one should laugh at scars. Scars are proof of survival. They should be respected, not mocked." Mira looked at him for a long moment. Her eyes softened, and for the first time she felt something stronger than relief. She felt gratitude. That evening, as she walked home with Aaron again, she realized how much his presence was changing her. For years, she had believed her scars made her different, something to hide. But now, standing beside someone who understood, she began to see them in a new way. They were not marks of shame. They were signs of strength, signs that she had lived through storms and still stood. And though the town might never see it, she knew at least one person did. The bakery had always been Mira's shield, a place where she could hide in plain sight. But since Aaron started visiting often, the shield felt less like a wall and more like a bridge. Each day they spoke a little more. Not always about the past, but sometimes about small things. The weather, the taste of a new recipe, or the birds that perched outside the bakery window. Yet beneath those simple conversations was a quiet understanding. Both carried stories that most people would never imagine, and slowly Mira began to share more pieces of her journey. One evening after closing, Mira invited Aaron inside before she locked the bakery. The warm smell of bread still lingered, and the soft glow of the oven gave the small room a gentle light. She sat across from him at the wooden table where she usually rolled dough. "I never thought I would speak of this again," she began. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried weight. "When I left the unit, I promised myself I would not look back. The memories were too heavy. But now, seeing you here, I feel it is time." Aaron leaned forward, listening closely. Mira lifted her sleeve, revealing the faded tattoo fully. Her fingers brushed over it gently. This mark, it was more than ink. It meant family. We were not related by blood, but we trusted each other with our lives. I was the only woman in my group, but they treated me as equal. We shared food, laughter, and fear. And then the battles came. One by one I lost them. The scars I have, they are not just mine. They are reminders of the ones who never came back. Arun's eyes darkened with understanding. I know that silence. The silence of remembering names and faces that others forget. Mira nodded. When I returned, I thought I could live quietly. I wanted to disappear into simple work, to make bread and pretend I was ordinary. But the scars did not let me forget. The people here only see them as strange or ugly. They never think of the story behind them. Aaron's voice softened. They do not need to understand. What matters is that you know the truth and you carry it with honor. Your scars are not weakness. They are strength. For the first time in years, Mira felt her chest loosen. The burden she carried seemed lighter when spoken aloud. She had never explained her scars to anyone in town. But now, with Arun listening, she felt free. The next morning, word had spread in whispers about the scene with the young men who had laughed at her days ago. Some townspeople were curious. Some said the gray-haired man was protective of Mira. Others guessed he was a relative. Mira ignored the gossip. She focused on her bread, her customers, and on the small comfort that Aaron's presence brought her. That afternoon, a little girl came into the bakery with her mother. The girl stared at Mira's scars with wide eyes, then asked innocently, "Did it hurt?" The mother quickly pulled the child away, embarrassed. But Mira smiled gently and bent down. "Yes, it hurt," she said softly, "but it also made me strong. Sometimes scars are just reminders that we healed." The child nodded as if she understood, then smiled back before leaving. Mira stood quietly, realizing she had just spoken words she once would have never dared to say. That evening, as she walked with Aaron again, she told him about the girl. Arun smiled faintly. Children often see more clearly than adults. They do not judge, they only want to understand. Mira thought about that all night. Maybe it was true. Maybe it was not the scars that made people laugh, but their lack of understanding. And perhaps little by little she could change how they saw her. She looked at the tattoo again before bed. For years it had been a hidden mark of the past. Now it felt like a bridge to a new future, one where she did not need to hide completely. With Aaron beside her, the silence no longer seemed so heavy. She was still the woman who baked bread each morning, but she was also more than that, and slowly she was beginning to accept it. The days rolled into weeks and Mira's life continued to shift in quiet but meaningful ways. The bakery was still her world, but it no longer felt like a place to hide. With Arun's presence, the walls she had built around herself began to soften. Customers noticed small changes too. Mira's smile came more easily now, and she sometimes even laughed lightly when children spoke to her. But not everyone approved. A few townsfolk grew suspicious of Arun. They wondered why a man from outside visited so often and why Mira, usually distant, trusted him so much. Whispers rose again, but this time Mira did not let them weigh on her heart. She knew gossip could not erase the truth of what she and Aaron shared. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Aaron walked into the bakery and found Mira wiping down the counter. She looked up and greeted him with her usual calm smile. "You are here earlier than usual." "I finished my work early," Aaron replied. "I thought maybe we could take a walk before it gets dark." Mira hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She hung her apron on the wall, locked the bakery door, and joined him outside. Together they walked toward the edge of town, where the fields stretched wide and golden under the fading light. For a while they were silent, their footsteps crunching softly on the dirt road. Then Aaron spoke, his voice low. "I have been thinking, Mira, about the way people laugh or whisper. You have carried their judgment for too long. Maybe it is time you let them see a little more of who you are." Mira looked at him uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean telling your story. Even just a part of it," he explained. "Not the whole truth, only what you feel ready to share. If people knew you were more than what they see, perhaps they would learn to respect what they cannot understand." Mira shook her head slightly. "I do not know if I can. For so long I have hidden it. If I speak, they may laugh even more." Aaron gave a small smile. "Or they may listen. Sometimes people just need to see courage in order to find their own." They walked a little farther until they reached a wooden bench near the fields. The sky above was painted with shades of pink and orange, and a cool breeze brushed against them. Mira sat down, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I'm afraid," she admitted softly. "Afraid that if I open myself, I will break apart again." Aaron sat beside her, his voice steady. "You will not break. You have already endured storms that most people could never face. You carry scars, yes, but you also carry strength. And strength grows when it is shared." Mira was quiet for a long time, her eyes on the horizon. She thought of the girl in the bakery who had asked about her scars with such innocence. She thought of the laughter of the students and the whispers of neighbors. She thought of her unit, of the faces she still remembered, and of the tattoo that tied them together. Finally she said, "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps I cannot hide forever. But if I share, it must be in my own way. Not for gossip, not for pity, but to honor those who are no longer here." Aaron's eyes softened. "That is the best reason of all." As they walked back to town, Mira felt a small shift inside her. She did not yet know how she would speak or when, but the thought no longer filled her with fear. Instead, it felt like a duty she had carried for too long in silence. When they returned to the bakery, Aaron helped her place the chairs inside before leaving for the night. Mira stood at the doorway watching him go. For years she had believed her scars would always set her apart, a mark of difference that no one would understand. But now she realized they were also a bond, connecting her to someone who shared her silent battles. That night, as Mira lay in bed, she imagined herself one day standing before the townsfolk, not to prove anything but simply to share a truth. The thought was frightening, but for the first time it was also possible. She closed her eyes with a quiet strength she had not felt in years, knowing that with Aaron beside her, she could face what once seemed impossible.